Hey everybody, how's everybody doing? Hope everyone's doing well. What I like to do is, today I would like to talk about the law in evangelism. And what I try to do as I make these videos, I try to explain basically how I've learned over the years. There's things I did and then I realized, they weren't the best and the Lord showed me different ways. And that's what I'm kind of trying to do, and hopefully it's, beneficial to some people. And I know I've been getting text and people have talked to me too about it and been encouraged, and I'm really grateful that the Lord could use this. So the law in evangelism, if I would just go up to somebody and say to them, Jesus died on the cross for sin, or just go up and talk about Jesus dying on the cross for sin, they would be like, it wouldn't make a lot of sense. It's kind of weird. They would think of, first of all, they think I'm kind of weird, like, well, why is he telling me this? Or, oh yeah, I've heard that. It's not really hitting them and applying to them. And it would be kind of like this. If I would just go around saying, I found the cure for such and such disease, people might say, oh, that's nice. That's nice that you did that, or not really care. But say that same person would go to a doctor, they have symptoms, they go to the doctor goes over the things, sees their symptoms, and says to the person, you're going to die in a week because you have these particular symptoms, you have this particular disease. But you know what? I have the cure for that. I have it right here, and if you would take this, you can be completely cured. All of a sudden, that would be so important to them. They would want that because they don't want to die. They would desire that when they understood what they had so they can appreciate the cure. And it's the same thing in evangelism. If the person doesn't really understand their sin, they're not going to appreciate the gospel. They're not really going to understand the gospel. And so, what is sin? The little booklet I used to use said something similar to, called sin as passive indifference or active rebellion. Now, if I say that to someone, does that, really make a lot of sense? Does that really, kind of hit them? Does it make sense when I'm saying that? Looking back, I don't really think it did. What I want to do is I want to use the biblical definition of sin, which is in 1 John 3:4. It says, sin is a transgression of the law. Sin is a transgression of the law. And Paul says in Romans 7:7, I had not known sin but by the law. And in Galatians, Paul says 3:24, the law was our schoolmaster to bring us unto Christ. So basically, sin is a transgression of the law, and we can't really understand sin unless we understand the law. It's our schoolmaster to lead us to Christ. So let me explain what the law is not. The law is not something that we're supposed to live perfectly by to get us to heaven. Like if I keep all the commandments, I'm going to get to heaven. First of all, no one can do that. And the Ten Commandments basically are really God's reflection. God doesn't lie. God doesn't steal. It shows who God is, really. And that is, that's what's required of us, but we all fall short. All of sin falls short of God's glory. So as we use those commandments, as the person understands their sin and we use those commandments, it's preparatory work that we do so we can go into the gospel. And here's the great thing about using the law. Rather than talking to their intellect, basically the Holy Spirit is able to talk to their conscience. They're able to talk directly to their conscience. And I can testify over the years, it's been pretty incredible to see some atheists especially, and other people too, they're really arrogant or cocky. But as you start going through that, you can, it hits them. And I've actually seen some, atheists that are all cocky and all, they get up saying, oh, I don't want to talk about this and leave. But it's okay, even if you're trying to do the conversation and, you're sharing that, sometimes people come under conviction so much that they don't really want to deal with it. But, it's doing its work. So we're using the law to talk to their conscience and do preparatory work so we can share the gospel. And just in a review, I've talked about this before, so how do I do that? Generally, what I'll say to them is, do you think you're a good person? And almost everyone says they are, and I'll say, let me ask you a couple of questions to see if that's true. And then I start going through some of the commandments. I said, well, have you ever told a lie? If they say yes, well, what does that make you? If I murder, I'm a murderer. If I steal, I'm a thief. If you lie, you're a... And hopefully they're going to come to the point that they're a liar. Then the next question I'll ask is, have you ever taken anything that doesn't belong to you? And that would also include, even if something small, regardless of the value. Like Mom said, there's pie there, don't touch that. Have you just went and taken that? Have you downloaded things off the internet? Have you done that? And if they say, they'll say, yeah, I've done that. So what does that make you? And you wait for them to come up with, well, that would make me a thief. The next question you would ask them is, have you ever been just frustrated or upset and you just use God's name as a curse word? And most of the time, yeah, I've done that. And the Bible says that God will not hold him, he holds him guiltless, will not hold him guiltless, he uses his name in vain. So it's a serious thing. And then the last one would be, Jesus said on the Sermon on the Mount, if you even look at a woman to lust after her, you've committed adultery in your heart. Have you ever looked in that manner? And you'll say, yeah, I've done that. And then you say, well, I'm not here to judge you. I'm encouraging you here to judge yourself. But by your own admission, you'd be a lying, thieving, blasphemous adulterer at heart. Now, if God would judge you by that, would you be innocent or would you be guilty? And most of the time, they would say, I would be guilty. I've broken those. And then the next question you say, so according to that, would you go to heaven or hell? Now, sometimes they're still going to say to you, well, I would still go to heaven because God's forgiving. And then you just have to kind of back them up and say, well, I'm not saying that. If you're judged just by this and nothing else, where would you go? And the other thing is, you just admitted you've done these things. So, then they'll be, well, I guess I'll go to hell then. And then at that point, I generally say, I deserve it. I deserve it too. I've broken these things. I deserve it too. So does that concern you? And if it concerns the person, then we're able to go into the gospel. So what happens though? I want to backtrack a little bit. So then we get to the gospel. So that's how the law works. The law is basically there to convict a person, to realize that they're a sinner. And then you're able to share the gospel. So now I've shared with a lot of people, and on occasion, I've had just a couple, 3 or 4 people, that basically, as I went through the commandments, basically said they've not done any of them. So how do you deal with that? I want to hit that. So what do you deal with? I mean, at the one time, initially, I didn't necessarily deal with it the best. I used to live in Pennsylvania, and I remember in Bethlehem, an older lady that I guess was walking near my neighborhood, I talked to her, and then, I went through those 4. Generally, I don't ask, just so you know, I don't ask women if they've looked with lust. I generally will use a different question, like have you honored your parents? I generally don't use that one. But, so she said, I've done all these things. So then I went to the first commandment, have you always put God first in your life? Always. The lady said she has. And, she was saying she's done everything. So I really didn't know what to do. And then another time in Pennsylvania, I remember it was a bus stop, I believe. And this one's interesting because it was a younger guy that was standing next to his friend. And as I went through the commandments with him, he was saying, I haven't done it, I haven't done it. And I looked at him and said, are you sure? And his friend looks at him and goes, yeah, you've done it, come on. So his friend kind of helped me out, so I was able to, go into the gospel. And then here at UCF, I've learned a little bit more now, which I want to share. So I had an individual do that. I know the people that I was with sharing couldn't believe this person, that, the arrogance they had that, I've never done this, or whatever. I've always put God first, always put God before myself 100% all the time. So if the person's saying that they've obeyed all the commandments, what you need to do is take them to 1 John 1:10. If we say that we have not sinned, we make him a liar, and his word is not in us. So what I asked him is this. Okay, so it's saying basically that if you've not sinned, you're calling God a liar. So am I going to believe God or am I going to believe you? And I think that's the most powerful, verse to do that for that particular thing. So, again, in a recap though, the most important thing we do prior to sharing the gospel, the person has to understand they're a sinner. They have to understand their sin. Unless they realize the holiness of God and their sinfulness, they're not going to appreciate the gospel. They're not going to appreciate that Jesus died on the cross for sin. was buried and rose again from the dead. So, and the way we do that is through the law, through the Ten Commandments, to ask those questions, and that prepares the person so then we can share the gospel. So hopefully that's helpful. God bless.